So I want to talk to you more about actions and events on AMP. As you see in the previous tutorial, we made the text disappear, okay, by clicking this button. And we did that by using the event tap, which is a click. Now, in AMP, there are different elements support different actions and events, but the tap is supported by all elements, okay, and the actions hide, show, and toggle visibility are also supported by all elements. So you can hide, show, or toggle visibility to every element in AMP. However, there are some actions that are only supported by specific elements. For example, the action play is only supported by video, okay, by AMP video. So if I wanted to convert this button to say play video, and this element was actually an AMP video instead of a paragraph, then it would have worked. If I try to do it now, it won't work because the paragraph doesn't support the action play. But if the paragraph was AMP video, by pressing this button, the paragraph or the video would have started playing. But with hide, show, toggle visibility, and there's also a couple of other methods that you can find in documentation that are also supported by all elements, but those are the most used ones, okay? Now let me talk about events. As I said, tap is supported by every element in AMP, but there are also other events. For example, the onChange event is supported by selects or by checkboxes, by radio buttons. It just depends on the element. Because, for example, the button cannot change, okay? The button, the only thing you can do is press. But if you have, for example, a select, then select has options, okay? So you can bind a specific action on change, okay? Now let me show you real quick. Let's make this text over here hide whenever I change the options on the select dropdown, okay? Let me add another option. Let's say option 2. So what I want to happen is I want when I change the select, when I change the options, this text to hide. Okay, so the way to do that is we use the on attribute equal quotation marks, and remember that the first thing we must add after on is the event that if we're going to perform the action on. So you have to really think, okay, what do you want to accomplish on what event? For example, do you want to hide the text on click of the option, or do you want to hide the text on change of the option? So you're thinking and you're saying, okay, I want to hide it whenever I change the option in my select dropdown. Okay, so for this, we have to use the change event, okay? So what we're saying is on change, then we want to say colon, and the next thing we want is the ID of the element we want to manipulate. In this case, the ID is test. So we're using test, and then we're using a dot, remember? And after the dot, we're saying what action do you want to be performed. So let me recap. We have the on attribute, and we're saying on change, so on the select dropdown change, perform this action on this element, in this case the test element that we have referenced by the ID. Okay, so what we wanted to do on option change, we wanted to hide that text, so we do dot hide. Okay, so let's save it and let's try it out. Let's change the option. Let me see, I'm clicking but nothing is happening because we have changed it from tap to change. So let's do this. Okay, now I see I changed my option and the text is hidden. And I use the hide action that is available to all AMP elements, but I use the change that is only available on the select and the checkbox and the radios. So I was able to perform this action because the event was supported by this element. So for example, if I do the same thing with my button, it's not gonna work because the button doesn't support let me copy and paste, and let's say hide text. See, the button doesn't support the change event. So when I press it, it's not going to hide the text. But if I change it to tap, which the button does support, if I press it, then the text is hidden. If you go to the AMP documentation, it shows the events and the actions supported by all elements in AMP. For example, see, we have the change event that we just used, and it says change event, and it is supported by these elements. So it's supported by the input element, it is supported by the radio, checkbox, and select, okay? Then we have input debounce, we have input throttleed, and all of these, you know, are support. They're showing what kind of element support. For example, the amp carousel supports the slide change event, okay? So every time your slide change, you can have boxes jumping up, you can have, you know, sections opening, whatever you want, you know, their interactivity is endless. So every time you want to perform a specific event on an element, go to the documentation and check if it is supported, okay?